You know, it's been a while since I made a new video. I've been very busy with things IRL and stuff, but I thought back to my previous video that I made about a year ago about the PS5 Pro.
Where does the PS5 Pro even make sense in this? By the time if it ever ends up releasing, there's still not going to be enough games that show that what the PS5 is capable of. There just isn't enough games yet to justify just making a Pro model.
I looked at my previous script again, looking at what a hypothetical PS5 Pro was going to be, and I came off feeling very disappointed. It's a console that just didn't really need to be made. There was just no big upgrades to people's entertainment centres to justify a mid-generation upgrade, and we still have people thinking the PS5 has no games at this point in the console's life cycle, a joke that's gotten really tiring when we've gaslighted people into thinking that even the best PlayStations ever made apparently have no games. Let's go back to like a year later in 2024, and this console still does not have any reason to exist. The current PS5 still runs games at an acceptable level to most people, but what absolutely blows my mind is just how bad the value is with this console. Obviously I'll talk about it later in this video, but more importantly, I think we are reaching a turning point where we are finally realizing that chasing an impossible race to have the best, most cutting-edge graphics in gaming is resulting in very little benefit for both gamers and developers alike. The graphics arms race that has existed for years in the console and PC space has been futile for a while now. A lot of people just haven't realised it until now. Now, to consider where we are with the PS5 Pro, we're going to take a bit of a step back to 2016 with the PS4 Pro. Up to that point, we never received a mid-generation refresh of a console, aside from the consoles being cheaper to produce, and ultimately we would get slimmer, more refined consoles midway into a console's lifespan. Think Nintendo DS Lite, PS2 Slim, that sort of thing. We've been accustomed to it for quite a while now. What Sony did in 2016 was unprecedented, a console that would retain the same ecosystem and game library as the current PS4, but it would also be far more powerful and be strong enough to target high resolutions and even do 4K gaming. The PS4 Pro also had the option of allowing people to choose how to render their games. If you wanted the best, most high quality visuals, you wanted fidelity mode to hit that 4K solution. Quick disclaimer here, a lot of games on the PS4 Pro use checkerboarding to hit that resolution or dynamic scaling if the game was pushing the console hard. If you didn't have a 4K display but wanted the better frame rates, performance mode was there to choose. At the time, it was such a weird concept to have a mid-generation upgrade, just as the PS4 was starting to finally get big titles like Bloodborne and Uncharted 4. But in hindsight, it made sense. The base console, it was weak from day one. Games just never managed to hit the 1080p resolution or maintain or even hit 60 FPS, though it did a much better job than the PS3 and Xbox 360 before it. Also, you've got to consider that the fact that 4K TVs were only just starting to hit the market, so not only it was a good time to upgrade not just the TV but a Pro, it made sense if you wanted the extra detail, that extra resolution. Also, it was reasonably affordable too. It launched at the same price as the PS4 did back in 2013, $400. That was a completely different Sony to what we have now. They had a 10-minute presentation for the PS5 Pro last month, and it gave us some interesting statistics. 75% of people using the PS5 would pick performance mode when given the option, a huge change from a time when developers valued visual fidelity far more at the time. The vast majority of games on the PS5 target or even lock onto 60 FPS, though this is at the cost of extra visual detail. In that 10-minute presentation, they were talking about better ray tracing, better detail, the need to not have visual fidelity be compromised by targeting better frame rates, and using AI machine learning to make up for all this with PSSR. Okay, that's cool, but let me tell you this. They presented it in the worst way possible. First of all, they're trying to present the PS5 Pro using a PS4 game, The Last of Us Part 2, an astonishing example of how diminishing returns can really impact a console. I mean, yes, it is a fantastic looking game on the PS4, no doubt about it, but it looked just fine on the PS5. What are we getting here with the Pro? High resolution at 60 FPS just for slightly better detail that you're not going to notice as much when you're playing the game? They did the same thing with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and Horizon Forbidden West. Oh, look at that detailed crowd, or those detailed cinematics. I genuinely don't understand how that's even much of a difference unless you notice so closely to the screen. The vast majority of people are playing on a TV from a distance, and so those finer details aren't going to be noticed here. I did mention in my previous video that even if we did get a PS5 Pro, targeting 8K just doesn't make much sense since we don't have many TVs targeting that resolution, and there's just barely any 8K content anyway. They used Gran Turismo 7, which is a great game by the way, to showcase what the PS5 Pro could do with an 8K TV, and honestly, we're not at the point where we need 8K when we're still seeing the current consoles and even some PCs struggle to operate some games at 4K. For all of this, guess how much this console costs? $700.
You serious?
How is it costing this much and offering barely any value above the base PS5? At least with the PS4 Pro, it costs a reasonable price to give you a pseudo 4K gaming machine with decent performance. But here, you're getting a console that just doesn't display as much value when the base console already managed to run most games well. Not only that, Sony are really pushing it by selling the Pro as a digital-only machine. To add a disk drive, it costs an extra $80, and the vertical stand is around an extra $30, something the original PS5 came with as standard, and of course in other territories it's more expensive anyway. Like in here in the UK, the PS5 Pro costs £700, the disk drive itself is an extra £100. I mean, the vertical stand, an extra £25, so you're just paying pretty much double the price of what a normal PS5 would cost anyway. For that price, you could just get a base PS5, a Switch 2 when that drops next year, or even a Steam Deck and still have money left over for some games or controls instead, or heck, even a good PC build. Why in the fuck does this thing even exist? You've all probably seen this one photo showing the diminishing returns of video game graphics over time. This cropped up when the PS4 was launched, but it still had quite a decent visual leap over the PS3 as time went by. The problem was that as graphics in video games became a lot better, it's harder to show a big visual leap without spending significant resources, time, and money to show for it. Notice how big the leap from PS1 to PS2 was, with games finally being able to show lifelike character models, detailed fully 3D environments, and effects they couldn't possibly pull off on the PS1, or the leap to the PS3 and Xbox 360 where you have bigger open worlds, anti-aliasing and detail that a PS2 just couldn't handle. Over time, each console generation sold itself on the premise that you can see these better visuals that the older console can't handle at all. This has lasted for years, if not decades, but as time has gone by, the diminishing returns of evolving video game visuals has become so noticeable that to this day, we still have games dropping on the PS4 next year. Games look so good now and they're so scalable on engines, they could still release it on an older console unless you wanted to make use of that newer hardware in a meaningful way. Not to mention, it just makes upgrading to the newer console feel like you're just getting a nice little resolution or frame rate bump compared to what you were getting before. It's what makes the PS5 Pro such a redundant console to most people, because it's just ironically enough exposing a problem that we are only just starting to take notice of. Games already pretty much have reached the point of photorealism. Working on more intense graphics is not the only path we can take anymore. Simply relying on the sheer horsepower of the machine will not bring the industry a bright future. Nintendo's ex-CEO at the time, Satoru Iwata, he made this quote a very long time ago. He realized that pushing for bigger and better visuals was not going to be the way forward in the long term, as the rest of the video game industry is painfully starting to realize. It's why we instead got Nintendo doing their own thing with the Wii, the DS, and the Switch, and it's worked incredibly well for them. Their games are tightly designed with brilliant mechanics, are budgeted properly, and they still look fantastic visually. I recently played Super Mario Galaxy and I still think that game plays and looks amazing even to this day. Which brings us to what I was talking about with the PS5 Pro. Sony has made a console that has ironically given it the attention that it didn't need, that we don't really need consoles that only marginally push a dying race to the bottom for better visuals. when games take years to develop for and cost millions in the process, the idea that consoles have to have better graphics to differentiate themselves and be the best is starting to feel very ancient now. Games already look good as they are, we just need better features that make that console worth owning. They've really just self-reported themselves into selling an expensive console that no one wants, and is just pushing a dying race to the bottom for something that no one really wants. We kinda have to rethink what distinguishes a console from what has come before. As in, what features can it have that make games that weren't possible beforehand? For the next generation of consoles when they eventually drop, it shouldn't be about the graphics, it's got to be thinking outside the box with game design that sets the bar above everything else. After what we saw with the PS5 Pro, it's made one thing for certain: chasing better graphics for games is becoming a thing of the past now. I do want to hear everyone's thoughts in the comments below, of course, and there are some videos that are going to pop up on the screen that I've made before in the past, so definitely do check them out, of course. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.